All right, welcome back to the next episode of the Rise and Bind podcast. I'm Chris Langell, your host and founder of Advisor Evolved. Super pumped to be here today with a newer client of Advisor Evolved and a guy that has a really interesting story that we're going to dig into. And this is part of a series that we're going to be doing, an ongoing series called Niche Pursuits, where we talk to agencies about niching down and the successes and the failures and the adventures, the ebbs and flows of the process of choosing a niche and dominating that niche. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Mike Dull of evuniverse.com, evuniverse.com. Mike, what's up, brother? Thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
Yeah, you have an interesting story. And when you came to us, you came to us from a much larger website build, and we'll talk about that as we go through this because some of it's kind of crazy, and I think it would be good for agents to hear your story with that. But your niche is electric vehicles, so you're in the EV space, insurance for. So when that came across our desk, I kind of jumped at that because I thought it would be cool and it's different. We don't have any other agencies that really were building a niche around EVs. So like, talk to us about what led to that niche and sort of your story, because you guys, I'm still uncovering things and uncovering layers about what you guys do. Like you have like a podcast and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah, so my background's pretty varied. So I'm a pharmacist by training. I came out of pharmacy school, pretty quickly took over like clinical programming for a large pharmacy chain. Long story short, on the business side, I've started a number of different companies. We started a clinical call center. So it was the largest clinical call center in the US. And we had about 550 employees there. And we sold out, had a nice exit. That was about 4 years ago now. That company is just slated to go public through a merger fairly soon. But I've been a car guy since I was like 2 and had a bunch of friends that were in the industry already. One of them is a VP at Haggerty Insurance. He is on our advisory board and just a really good guy. But I saw some of the things he was doing on the insurance space and the auto space, and he was texting me pictures of these massive collections he was seeing and going to all these cool car shows, stuff that I've wanted to do forever. And then another buddy of mine who's also on our board was the head of Auto Week and the head of Jalopnik, so some of the major auto publications. Again, he's driving multi-million-dollar cars and testing them and doing kind of the fun stuff, and I was doing pharmacy. And so I was not only jealous but also really into EVs and had been for a number of years. And so after we had our exit, I started EV Universe, which was originally supposed to be just a one-stop shop for EV owners, and that was going to be it. And so what we had, because I like buying and selling cars, like an auto trader for EVs, an e-commerce store, and then insurance. So as people come in, they find the car, they learn about them, they get the products, accessories, and then before you leave, you got to get insurance for your car. And so that company has been up and running for about 3 years. And what we really found over that time frame is the insurance piece was really taken off, and the other pieces were really cool and had a lot of fun doing them, but the ROI really wasn't there for what we had put into it. And so decided to go, hey, this is working, this is not working. Let's just focus on what's working, and here we are. So we had a massive website that was very large build. As you and I have talked before on some of the details of it. We had API calls not only to dealerships but to some of the major connections like Carfax and Experian and some of the other players out there. And it was a lot. I mean, it was a lot. And really, if you're going to do something, I think, especially in the business world, when you niche down, it makes a huge difference. And you can become truly that expert in that little field. And you can be known for that. And then so, again, just over a short time frame, once we made that switch, things have improved a lot for us. So anyways, happy to be here and happy to share that story.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I had no idea about the pharmacist thing.
Yeah.
I was a barber in a former lifetime, so I guess it all makes sense, man. It's I don't think anybody ever like intentionally sells insurance. You fall into it for one reason or the other, and yeah, that's very interesting. So the EV thing is cool because I think that on the surface it's like, yeah, we're doing auto insurance for EVs, but my mind is kind of spinning right now as we kind of talk through this, and I think that niche also. And by the way, I'm going to say niche. I know some people say niche. I don't think I'm fancy enough for that.
Same.
I don't know. I feel like it should all be pronounced niche, but some people will probably fight me on that. But anyway, I feel like your niche opens up doors to other things. Like, for example, we have a client in New Hampshire who's in a very like wealthy area of New Hampshire and has a location in Connecticut as well. And he's like, we want to target high net worth households. And I said, let's talk. People aren't typing in high net worth insurance into Google. It's not a keyword that gets a lot of volume. It's typed into Google, don't get me wrong, but there's not enough search volume to really run campaigns around that. Obviously, you can put a page on your website that targets those keywords, but we were trying to scale something a little bit larger. So we're looking at ways to do that. And we decided to do a combination of Google and Facebook ads, more so heavily leaning on the Facebook side of things, targeting specific zip codes, like geo-targeting with the ads, running ads on top of actual different auto dealerships. So like Range Rover dealerships, like within a mile of the Range Rover dealership, within a mile of the Porsche dealership, within a mile of the Tesla dealership. And he was like, that's a great idea. Like, let's do that. And so that's part of our strategy right now. And the campaign is very new. We launched it like a week or so ago, and it already has a couple qualified leads, which is awesome because that's not typically normal with a brand new campaign with a brand new ad account. But the point that I'm getting at is like the EV demographic, right? There's a stereotype. There's a demographic that comes along with that, right? It's engineers, it's doctors, it's lawyers, it's people that, that have a certain lifestyle, right? I mean, you don't typically see, and there's nothing wrong with this. I'm just pointing this out, and I think you'll probably agree. You don't typically see like a rough and tumble, like blue collar, like, contractor, right? Driving around in a Tesla, right? There's a certain demographic, like I said, there's a certain demographic that buys EVs, and I think that opens up the doors to other cross-selling and upselling opportunities that, people aren't think of. Like, have you found that yourself, and are you kind of running into that yourself?
Yeah, I mean, and when we first started the business, I mean, we looked at what a typical customer was, right? And I kind of already had that in mind just because of owning EVs in the past and kind of knowing the other folks. But yeah, I mean, typically engineer is number one. I mean, that's the number one occupation of an EV owner is an engineer, and typically it's an IT engineer, someone who's working on computers. I mean, that's the first thing. So you get the kind of early adopters in the EV space, and the demographic is obviously changing, right? So you have those folks that are the doctors, the lawyers, engineers that are in the EV space. You're getting, as the price point has dropped, you're getting some other occupations and different demographics, but typically they're going to be a homeowner, right? So that changes things, especially with insurance. And then they also have businesses too. I mean, it's going to be much more likely to have a business if you have an EV versus a lot of these other vehicles, at least that you can tie into really easily. I mean, collector car market, that's a different thing as well. But I mean, you're right, spot on. I mean, that's the folks you're going after. So from a targeting perspective on marketing, it's easier because who your key demographic is.
Yeah.
But, there's other things that we kind of look at too is kind of on the commercial side, like who are the folks that are servicing the EVs? Who are the ones who are putting the charging networks, like that kind of stuff? Because those are our clients as well. We're not just focused on the personalized, also the commercial. So there's differences. I mean, when you're dealing with high voltage electricity, I mean, you got to know the right things, and you also got to speak to speak. And then also when you get into kind of what those risks are, they're going to be different. And so when you're talking to underwriters and having different conversations with even the customers, like truly, what are they working with? Like, are they installing DC fast chargers? That's a whole nother ball game than if someone's doing a level 2 at someone's house. And so, I can keep going forever on this topic, but I mean, there's definitely some major differences on who you're targeting.
Yeah, it opens up a lot of doors. Wasn't there there was some type of, and I personally, I try not to watch the news as much anymore. But I know that there was like a law, or maybe there still is a law in California, like related to electric vehicles, right? Like, don't you have to drive an EV or something like that? Like, you have to.
If you go there, you'd think there was a law that everyone had to. I mean, there's so many Teslas out there, but no, I mean, so they're talking about 2035 as far as no new gas sales. Like,
got it. That's what I'm thinking of. That's what I'm thinking of.
And so there's discussions on other states doing that. There's many countries doing that, especially Europe, but that's pretty well known. In fact, a lot of automakers, and it'd be really interesting to hear the conversations going on there right now on what they're going to be doing, if they're still going to be making gas-powered cars in 2030, 2035, when that's going to change. And every week's a different story. But I mean, over the last couple of years, it really has moved towards, if they're not outlawing them per se on new cars, they're going to be moving away from, building them. I mean, look at Porsche, for example. I mean, you got the Macan, which they have their EV. It's a $100,000, small SUV. Then you have the Cayman, which they're talking about that coming out as EV very soon. Are they also going to be making the gas powered version? Are they DCing it? What are they doing? So
Yeah.
we'll find out.
Interesting. Yeah, a buddy of mine's he's a big Audi guy, and he was like, yeah, Audis, they're going to eliminate combustion engines. And then this was a couple years ago when EVs were just like blowing up, and then Audi came out and said they also fired their CEO not that long ago, but they came out and said like they're going to put a halt to that, that game plan, and they are still going to. It seems like some of the auto manufacturers are sort of backpedaling a little bit. Is that something that you're sort of aware of or familiar with?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely are. I mean, so the political climate, and we don't need to get into that whole
Right.
thing. I mean, like that is definitely impacting the regulations and where things are getting pushed. So that does change things.
Sure.
It also depends on if you look at US or if you look at worldwide too. So like they'll still produce them for the US, but if you look at other markets, they're really moving a lot more towards EVs than the US is even. So those are things that I have to keep track of, like, where are the sales going? Is it, like, do we look at hybrids? And we do hybrids as well. We'll insure anything,
Sure.
like where we're focused on. And frankly, I think the hybrids are going to be taken off more in the U.S. than what the electrics have been recently, just because of some of the regulations and some of the benefits that we're seeing with them.
Yeah.
I mean, have you seen Scout? I mean, Scout Motors, that's coming
No.
back. Yeah,
That's an EV? Okay.
yeah. So they're making that EV and a hybrid. Yeah, so that's a VW.
Interesting.
Yeah, brand now, and so that'll be
Oh,
coming.
yes. I know who you're talking about now. Yes, yes, yes. Okay.
Those are super cool. So they're gonna be made down in South Carolina. They're in the
Interesting.
that factory. Yeah, so that'll be pretty cool to see those
Yeah.
vehicles on the road.
It seems like while some of these EV automakers are like on this trajectory, like up and to the right, some of them are like, I think what's one like Fisker, like some of them are like falling apart, and they're like, cars that were like 80,000, like they're selling for like 35,000 brand new. And you're like, damn, dude, the margin on that was like 50 grand. Like
Yeah,
I'm in the wrong business.
Fisker was yeah. I mean, so they're bankrupt now. So that's a long story. That's probably a whole other podcast just for that thing. But
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, those are 75, 80 grand for that SUV. And now you can pick up on the used market for 5,000-10,000 miles for 20
Yeah, that's wild.
retail. I mean, but the thing is, you can't really service them that well. And they had software issues, and they weren't that great of a vehicle to begin with. So
Yeah.
like that's an issue. And like you look at VinFast, I don't know if you're familiar with VinFast, but it's a Korean company that's making EVs, and some carriers won't cover them, period.
Interesting.
So yeah, so it's knowing that kind of stuff and figuring out where you can find coverage for folks.
Yeah, the market's changing by the day. I mean, I have a Ram 1500, and I
Nice.
swear I don't drive a ton because I work from home, while driving. But, like I put gas in that thing what seems like every couple of days. Like I think I average like 12 or 13 miles a gallon. So like I was talking the other day to my buddy. I'm like, I think I'm going to get an EV, and he's like, you're not getting an EV. How could you go from a Ram to an EV? And I'm like, well, there's a Ram charger that's coming out, which is actually a hybrid. It's a battery that's battery powered, but it takes gas because the gas charges the battery, and it promises up to like whatever 800 mile range, and like something ridiculous like 0 to 60 in like 4 seconds for like a 6-ton truck. So I'm like, I'm not in a rush to make a change, but like I think I will probably take a look at that because I love the Ram, but like it is some days it's like driving like a bread truck. It's big, it's not as agile. And like a buddy of mine has a Model 3, and like I sat in it, and we pull off from a green light, pull off with a green light, and it's like your back like hits the back of the seat. And he didn't even have the performance model, just a base Model 3. And I'm like, dude, this thing is fun. He's like, I love it.
It's funny. Like and I'm a big truck guy too. So, and what we've done with our social media and our podcast stuff, I've test driven everything. I've owned way too many cars. And
Yeah.
so this last year I had a Cybertruck. I was like the third person in North Carolina to have one. I got stories on that thing, but it had a Rivian. And then also I've got a Lightning right now. And like the F1, I mean, take a regular F-150 and then just make it fast. Like 0 to 60 is under 4 seconds on that thing. And the handle's just a little bit better because it's got an independent rear suspension. man, that thing, it's just a great F-150 is what it is. Plus you have the frunk, which is just massive. So like when we go to
Yeah.
Costco, everything goes in the
Yeah.
frunk. Yeah,
Yeah.
me, my wife, and 2 kids, and we can put everything in there. The bed is empty.
Yeah.
Like
That's awesome.
traveling, oh, dude, it's awesome. So there's that, and the Rivian, man, that thing was 0 to 60 in like 3.1, 3.2,
Yeah.
100 horsepower, 835. I mean, that thing moved. Not the biggest truck, but yeah, I mean, the Ram Charger, that'll be a blast too. So
I like the Rivian. I cannot get past the headlights. I just can't do the headlights,
I
dude.
like my wife. My wife
I
hates
can't do the headlights, bro. I look at that and I'm like, I love like the shape, the size, like I love it. And then like the front end of it just like completely
kills it.
ruins it for me. But I've heard great things about that. I mean, I think one of our clients, I can't remember who it is, has one, and he was like on a waiting list for it, and like he loves it. But talk about your previous site, because like you
Sure.
said earlier, like we talk to agents a lot. People come to us a lot with ideas for projects, and without realizing the depth and the size of the project. So I'm gonna put my phone on do not disturb here. People are blowing me up here. So, one example is like a client wants us to build a custom portal for his commercial clients. And we said, look, man, like it's physically possible, but understand this is a large project that's going to take months. And at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself whether or not your clients are actually going to even use it. We built a portal for an agency not that long ago. This is probably 5 years ago. And after 6 months, it was 30 grand to build. After 6 months, they scrapped it because nobody was using it.
Yeah.
So yeah. So the point that I'm getting at is like with your old site, like you probably got yourself into something that maybe you didn't realize with like, I mean, you said it was like a 7-figure build, right?
It's
Talk
a
more about that.
figure build, yeah. Decent over 7 figures. So I mean, if you think of Auto Trader, right? So you think of all the vehicle listings and how those are laid out and the functionality from a filtering perspective. We had 36,000 cars on our site at one point in time. And what I want to do with the site is not only just have the Auto Trader kind of components, right? So, or like cars.com or whatever you want to call it, but then also information on battery health. So we had integrations with Recurrent, which if you're not in the EV space, it's a company that grabs data remotely from EVs and checks battery reports and stuff like that. So you can see what their actual range is now versus when they were new and that kind of thing. And so we had a lot of integrations in that way, along with ways for people to trade in their cars. You saw the number of blog posts we had, and we had a couple hundred
Yeah.
of those tying things into our YouTube channel. We had things tying into our podcast, and I mean, just the layers upon layers that we had. And it took us 2.5 years to build that the whole thing to where it was. And I think for us to make it what I want to really, I mean, we even had it tied into our online store. So you'd look at a car, and next to the car would show the parts that would fit that car. So you could buy the car, buy the parts, and we still obviously own all the code and all that kind of stuff. But to get it to where it needed to be, we needed to have more eyeballs on it. And when you're competing against the big boys like Auto Trader and Cars.com and Car Gurus, you got to have some other way to get those eyeballs. And so we were getting traction, but it was going to be a long, long slog. And as you know, with the hosting costs, especially when we have that heavy of a site, it's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I found you and started having conversations with you on why we went with you all, is we needed something that was specific for insurance that could do what we want to have done, but then also have a really clean, modern website, everything tied in. But at the end of the day, what I was most impressed on, it sounds like an infomercial at this point, but with the amount of time and energy and funds we spent on the last site, like looking at, like I go to page speeds all the time and really looking at like if, how the pages function and what the SEO is like. And I did a lot of like internet sleuthing on what Advisor Involved had already done. And I was checking out the scores on all those sites, and I was super impressed because we couldn't get there. Granted, the build that we had was huge, but what you guys had and how you did it, I mean, like super fast, super responsive. The SEO is on point. All best practices are there. And I was like, that's what sealed the deal for me, is to get to a lighter website that was truly functional for those customers. And that's it.
That's awesome.
Because if you do too much, I mean, it's just people are going to go there. They're going to come to the site and then bail. And so it's less is more in a lot of ways, as long as it's done right.
That's awesome. And I appreciate you saying that, because we preach that to people all the time and they don't listen. And it's understandable, right? A lot of insurance agents, they're not UI, UX experts. They're not web design experts. They're not SEO experts, but it's like less is more, to your point. We always tell people, like, everybody wants the whiz bang site, animations, parallax scrolling, stuff flying in, pop-ups. And it's like, there's data that shows that actually has an extremely negative impact on conversions, because it actually distracts people from the main call to action. And that's a conversation we're constantly having, right? Because people want to add, carousels and carrier images and stuff. And we're like, look, we can do this, but it's going to cause your site to probably fail core web vitals. It's probably going to fail accessibility scans. It's probably going to, fail other performance scans. And it's like, we have to talk, we're constantly talking people off a ledge. And then the people that actually are like, dude, do it. We get it. Because at the end of the day, even to you, right? Like, you're not the target market for your own website. You know what I mean? Insurance agents are not the target market for their website. It's an insurance consumer. And when you're dealing with the general public, you're dealing with people that in large part are not very tech savvy, right? I remember my grandmother, God bless her, when she was alive, she'd call me in and, Chris, I can't figure out how to, do this or do that. And I'm like, Grandma, just click this little thing right here. Like, couldn't figure out how to close the window or click the button or do this. And it's like, you have to kind of assume that that's the type of user demographic that you're dealing with. And you have to sort of dumb things down on the sites. And we've had people actually say to us, like, your sites are cool. Like some of them look like, we've seen a couple that are like very basic. We're like, dude, that's on purpose. And those are the sites that convert the best. And you have to understand, people are very, and this is not to preach. I feel like I'm preaching. I'm not preaching to you or anybody else. Just people have a very short attention span. And when they get to a website, especially an insurance agency website, think about their mindset, right? People that come to an insurance agency website, they're typically not, it's not like shopping on Amazon where they're like, they're looking for something to buy. They're in a good mood. Like they probably have a problem when they come to your website. Their rate went up. They need something, they want to get a quote, all the other stuff, it doesn't matter. No. And so, yeah, that's one of the things. And to your point earlier about performance, a lot of people don't really realize that. And we need to do a better job of marketing this, because it is important. Our code base is extremely lightweight. Our stack is extremely lightweight, especially compared to some of our competitors in our category. That's important. Like, the actual framework, and there's a lot of websites that look cool on the outside, right? But they're the ones that perform the worst when we audit them. And that makes a difference. I mean, the page load speed, whether or not the website is accessible, that's a major thing going forward. There's a big change coming to that soon as well. But website accessibility is in and of itself is, again, same thing. It's a whole nother podcast. It's a whole nother topic, but I'm glad that you see that. And I kind of like when people are geeked out on that, like I am, because that's like, we start with performance and compliance first, and then we build on top of that, and we worry about the visuals and the user experience. So it's cool that you did that. And dude, when you told me 7 figures, I was like, that's wild. I mean, how many people did you have sort of in the background helping you with that? Because I mean, I imagine, like, for that size site,
yeah,
like Auto Trader probably has 300 people that are in the pipeline.
I mean, the max we had, I think, like full-time folks on it was 5 full-time devs. But I mean, you got to remember, this is over 2.5 years, right? So, but that was internally. We had external group too, and so. Yeah, I mean, by the time you add everyone in there, I mean, I'd say internal, like 25 people at least.
Yeah.
I mean, and you saw that. I mean, you saw the back end of what was put into it, and and at the end of the day, do we probably get overcharged? Absolutely, right? Like, the internal folks, I know what those costs are. External, how many hours do they put in? All that's debatable. So was it? Yeah. Could you compare it to a $500,000 build? Maybe. But. Anything in business, and this is the thing I've learned with my last company, this company, others that I help, is just because you're spending money doesn't mean you need to. Just because something's more expensive doesn't mean it's better. But you really got to put the 100%. Time, effort into the due diligence to find out, like, hey, what do I need? What's going to make the biggest impact? And if it's not going to move the needle, don't do it. I mean, you can look at all the flashy websites all you want, but if they're not going to convert, it really doesn't matter. And actually, you shouldn't do that. Oh,
Yeah.
and again, when I was looking at what you guys had and some of the different sites, a lot of them were, to your point, like flashy, right? Like they were kind of like more basic. And with EV owners in our niche, we have to have more tech forward. It has to be a little bit cleaner look. And that was the first question. And it was like, yep, we can certainly do that. I showed you a couple different options. You guys, like, yep. And it turned out great. And it really is it's just the front end. The back end is still basically the same, right? So for us, it works perfectly.
Yeah. No, I love it, man. It turned out great. And that was a fun one to work on. I kind of took the lead on that. At the time we had sort of an influx of orders, and I told our project managers, I said, look, I'm gonna take this one just because I've already, I'd already had a couple conversations with you at that point. But we did have a couple other team members jump in to help with stuff, but it turned out great, man. I know we had a couple of iterations and tweaks and whatnot, but yeah, it's that's one for the showcase, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on, because we run into a lot of niche agencies, and well, some folks, like they want a niche, but really like their niche is actually very broad. Whereas I think what you're doing, even though it is it's a large industry, you have a different sort of perspective and a different handle on it. With, like you said earlier, like it's not just about the personal lines, but it's it's the companies that are installing the chargers, and it's like the electrical, like, I mean, that there's stuff that goes into that niche that goes way beyond just insuring a Tesla.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
step one, but it opens up so many other doors to other stuff.
it does. Yeah. I mean, when we think about like what goes on with just an EV, right? Like you go to if you have a Rivian and you want to go charge a Tesla supercharger, you need an adapter. So it's like working with those companies that make the adapters, or like, the floor mats, or it could be, the electricians. I mean, there's so many pieces. It's just, I mean, like the automotive industry in itself, right? There's so many facets to it. I mean, the
Yep.
EV is no different. It's just what's propelling the car. And,
Yeah.
a lot of and frankly, the EV industry is just growing like mad right now. And a lot of those companies aren't going to be around in a few years. We'll see who wins in certain aspects, but I mean, there's tons of opportunity there.
Yeah. So talk to me real quick about your, you have a podcast I think might be interesting. Some of these other agents might be, curious about where to find you. Of course, evuniverse.com is your site, but I think you said you're going to be firing up the podcast, and you at one point, talk to me about that, because you had a pretty big following, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had a great following. So we've done it for 2.5 years. We paused for about, I'd say, the last 6 months or so, just because me and the two other guys who are on it, I've just been busy with stuff. It's Plug In for More was the podcast. And it really was just walking through people on EVs when they're first getting them. So it was kind of we had the three folks on it, myself, a guy named Tom Flinton, and then Bryant Colley, who's a Haggerty VP who I mentioned before. When we started the podcast, each of us was at different kind of points in our journey. I had already had EVs for a number of years, like a Tesla Roadster, and then like Bryant had just bought Kia EV6. So he's a classic car guy, but he was getting a first EV. He just bought it. And then Tom hadn't bought his yet, and he was just starting to think about it. So we're kind of getting each one of us and just talking through, what is level 1 charging, what's level 2, level 3, and just the kind of the basics of it.
Yeah.
And some of the things that are going on in the industry. So people who are EV curious, if that's a thing,
Yeah.
walking them through like, hey, what do you need to know to make this transition? Is it right for you? Are you towing a whole bunch? Because if you're towing a whole bunch with a big truck, probably not the right tool for that job. But
Yeah.
like, it's in. So that's really what the podcast is. It's kind of what our journey is, and helping people get educated on, if you're going to buy one, what's going on? Do you need to buy a new one, or can you get a used one? Where are the deals? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I was looking through your, so when we migrated the blogs from the one install over to the new one, I was like reading through some of them, and I'm like, I started like binging the content, because it was stuff that I never even thought like that I would even ask, but it was like, it was stuff like that. I'm like, damn, like you really truly are. And like, I'm not just saying this, like you definitely, like it's your niche, man. Like you own this niche. Like there's stuff that I had no idea about. And it's like, it's not just the EV, it's the ecosystem that you really have to have knowledge of. And that's something that you have a really good grasp on.
I appreciate that. No, I really do.
Yeah, man.
It's been a long journey, so I appreciate you seeing that. And I'm not, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. It's like wasted the last 5 years of my life, but I
Yeah,
appreciate that a lot.
no doubt, man. Well, thank you, man, for joining us on the Rise and Bind podcast. And folks, again, you can find Mike, evuniverse.com, and you could just check Mike out on socials, Mike Dole. Appreciate you, man, coming on to tell your story. And once this is wrapped up, obviously, we'll share this on socials, man. But yeah, keep crushing it, man. And I'm looking forward to a long relationship and helping you with the site. And I'm sure that, we'll probably be putting our heads together on other initiatives too. I mean, marketing campaigns and SEO stuff and ways to help you kind of grow in this niche even more. So thank you, brother, for coming on.
Absolutely.
And
thanks for having me, Chris. Have a great
yeah.
rest of the day. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you, man. We will see you guys on the next episode of Rise and Bind. We're out.